Hello and welcome back to the Spotlight Games podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a big change for game developers. Assassin's Creed Mirage and Resident Evil games are coming to the newest iPhone. Borderlands developer Gearbox is maybe being sold to the highest bidder. And of course, our sweet dumpster boy has finally played Starfield, so we're going to be sharing even more impressions of one of the year's most talked about video games. I'm your host, Patrick. Joining me, as always, the aforementioned sweet dumpster boy, Kamen. Kamen, how are you?
Patrick, doing good, buddy. How are you?
Oh, I'm a little eepy,
Of
a
course you are, a
little,
little
a
sleepy
little
boy.
tuck me in because I'm a little eepy. But I'm excited to talk about video games. I'm excited to feel like I'm just an arm's length away from my sweet dumpster boy Cayman. You live much further than an arm's length away from me these
Sure.
days. So Tuesday nights always a dream for me because we get to chat, we get to fucking get into unknown territory together.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of video game stuff to talk about because this is the Spotlight Games podcast where each week we spotlight the latest and the greatest in the world of video games. You can get it by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Spotlight Games Pod or by searching for Spotlight Games in your favorite podcast app. And hey, you can be on the show by tuning in as we record live Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/Spotlight Games Pod. So be sure to follow us there so that you're notified when we go live so you can be part of the conversation. In case you missed it, ICYMI. In case you missed it. Yeah, ICYMI. October 3rd came in. It's 3 weeks from today. We're going to be starting a 5-episode series of the top 100 games of all time. Why are we telling you now? Because in 3 weeks, this shit's closing down, and we need you to build the list. In the description of the podcast, the YouTube video, on our socials and our link trees, we've probably tweeted it. We've probably Instagrammed it. It's probably in our stories at some point. There is a Google form for you to fill out to help us build the list. You're going to give us your top 15 games of all time. A lot of math's going to happen. We're compiling it into the top 100 games of all time. It's already batshit insane with the amount of entries we've gotten, the games that are going to be on this list and not on this list. So if you got a game that you're really passionate about, that you really want to be in the top 100,
if you want to make
I'm gonna
sure,
also drop it in the chat here soon. If you're in the fucking chat right now, what's up, Cayman?
if you want to make sure that Bulletstorm is not in the top 10, you got to submit and push it out. So I can tell you right now, it's got points behind it.
It's got points behind it. There is a world, Cayman. I'm not gonna sit here 3 weeks ahead of time and spoil the list, Cayman. I'm not here to hashtag spoil the top 100. There's a big campaign on Twitter trying to hashtag spoil the top 100, and I'm not a part of it. Bulletstorm might be a little Cinderella story this time around, unless you, the listener and the viewer, friend of the pod, write in, tell us your top 15. Cayman, since I wrote this up today, since I put the doc together, we've already gotten 3 more responses.
Oh my
I'll just give
gosh.
you a little. How about this? How about a little? Let's just look at one response together right now. Just a couple of them. Just a couple little quick hits. World of Warcraft. I think that might be the first World of Warcraft that's been in the list, potentially.
Oh,
Super Smash Melee.
okay.
Somebody somehow did they submit a graph? I thought this was text only, but I'm seeing visuals. That's what I'm saying. The top 100, anything can happen, folks. Anything can happen. But you know that World of Warcraft is, I guess, going to be on the list in some capacity. That's your one spoil. Hashtag spoil the top 100. Cayman, last week, you, me, and some fucking interloper, Lucas, chatted about Starfield for what felt like days. We spoke so much about Starfield. And since then, I'm just kidding, Lucas. I love you. You're not an interloper. You've been playing Starfield. Give us your thoughts, doggy dog.
Oh, Patrick.
I know that sigh. I know that sigh from a mile away.
So here's the thing. I want to preface this by saying, if anyone knows me, they know that I'm an advocate for mediocre video games.
Oh, for sure. You're the biggest mediocre fan I know.
Yeah, I am an advocate for mediocre video games because here's my reasoning, right? A bad game is a game that you do not have fun playing. That is a bad game.
Sure.
A game that is fun to play is worth playing. That is a good game.
Sure.
Now, here's the thing. Talking about Souls games, we talk about Elden Ring, right? Almost no fun playing that. Is that a bad game? Yes, it is. It's bad on the scale.
On the Kamen scale of the good and bad.
Okay, so there's a reasoning and logic here, right? Elden Ring is a masterpiece, and it's you can say that it's fine. It's a masterpiece.
Sure.
Totally understand that. But when it comes to me personally, if I'm not having fun playing a game and I'm beating my head against the wall and I'm like being aggravated by certain whatever reasons, then like it'll start dropping on the scale for me and then go down, right? But I can say that game's a 10 out of 10, but I can also say like, hey, this game's design or whatever is bad. But I can look at a game like Saints Row, right?
2022?
2022, the reboot. I had a shit ton of fun playing Saints Row. It's on PlayStation Plus right now. If you guys have a PlayStation, you can play it through PlayStation Plus. That game is bad. That is a bad game. That game score should probably be about a 5 or a 6. I had so much fun playing it.
So it's not a good game, even though you had fun playing it.
Exactly. Starfield is a mediocre ass game that I'm having fun, but I'm also incredibly annoyed by.
Sure.
So I'm going to start by saying right now, Starfield is a solid 7 to a 7.5 out of 10. Like I think
how many roughly hours you got? Roughly.
I'm roughly 30 hours into the game.
Okay.
Here's the thing. This is a Bethesda game, and I think that you nailed it on the head the other day when you said that your mileage may vary depending on the type of person you are going into a game like this. If you don't like Skyrim or Fallout, you're not going to like this game. You might find some enjoyment out of the shipbuilding and the outpost building, that portion. You might. But you have to cut through a lot of fat to get to those aspects. So even then,
Sure.
I struggle with this idea of like, for the people who are very much in tune with just that, I'm sorry, I don't think you're going to enjoy the game enough to get to a point where you actually can have fun doing that. Because, and this is one thing that really annoys me about the game, is that I really like the way that like Skyrim, like the system with Skyrim, and Fallout did it too, where it was like the more you do an action, the better you get at that action, and you level up. They've removed that system, and I feel like that really hampers any sort of feeling of progress in this game, because you still have to do challenges to be able to unlock the ability to get like higher in those skills, but you're not actually making any progress towards that because you still have to allocate a skill point. And so I'm currently level 25 and I haven't even been able to do advanced lock picking yet. And I don't know if I ever will be.
I've been finding a lot of frustration with this too since last week, in that I feel like a happy medium would have been if the game was tracking these things in the background, and once you level up. So like as an example, I've started unlocking the research skill tree in terms of like weapon researching, spaceship researching, so that I can like craft shit,
Sure,
mod shit, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I spend a skill point and then it's like, go craft 5 of this thing. And I'm like, well, I don't have a need to craft 5 of this thing right now. I've crafted things in the past already. I feel like I'm at a place now where I don't need to craft anything in this exact moment. But in order to level up, I have to craft things. So now I'm wasting materials to craft things just to do that. But if it had been tracking that and I use the skill and it's like, ding, you've already done this challenge. Good job. Now you can unlock level 2. I would fuck with that.
Yeah.
But the fact that it keeps stopping me in the game does this a lot. It works against you when you're trying to do something a lot, whether that's in crashing the fucking game or not letting you move forward in a skill because in order to get more oxygen, I have to completely sprint 100 more times, which
Yeah.
I've done at this point what feels like 1,000 times. But
Mhm.
because I'm only now putting my skills into the oxygen skill tree, now I have to do those things again. I'm like, it just let me progress, dog.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I feel you.
so there's that. So I think that the terms of like the sense of progression in this game is definitely hindered. And I don't think it does a really good job on like helping you feel like you are making progress like an RPG normally functions, even with games like Skyrim or Fallout. So that's one of the big things that like immediately was like, I'm not huge on this. Where you can find workarounds is getting new spacecrafts or getting better gear that I feel like you can get that kind of stuff more organically in this game than
Mhm.
I feel like you could in previous Bethesda games. So that's nice because you can just go fucking if you go to a random planet and you see a spaceship drop, but if you haven't put enough points in there, you can only steal a certain level. So once again, that
Yeah.
you still are hindered. So that's an annoyance. The second thing, this game is not that good looking. It's not, and don't get me wrong, I'm running it on the Series S, so I'm not running it on the X, and I don't know if there's a real like any giant leap in fidelity from what I've
I think it's
heard.
just resolution
Okay, so from what I've
between
heard,
S and X specifically.
yeah, it's not a huge difference. It's not like you're playing God of War on the PlayStation 4 and God of War on the PlayStation 5. It's not the same,
Yeah.
right? So and the thing is, and I think that that's just kind of baked into the engine, and they built a new engine for this, but I think there's a lot of things that are still hung up there. So, like, for instance, one of the things I will say, Bethesda doesn't know how to make kids. They all are just miniature humans, and that to me is really funny and I love that about this because they haven't changed it all. But I think it's ambivalent of the other issues at hand that like when you go to like a hub world on a planet and
Mhm.
it feels lifeless. Like you can't really do much unless the character has a name on their head. And you'll do actions. You'll pull a gun out and fire it in a crowd and no one runs. And you're like, what the
Yeah.
fuck? Stuff like that is immersion breaking in a sense that like that's doesn't feel like if I drew a sword in Skyrim in a town or like I
A
pulled out a
guard will
flame,
come over and be like,
yeah,
"What
be
the
like,
fuck
what
are you
the
doing?"
exactly. So it's like little weird step backs that it feels like that they've made. And it could potentially be that they made purposeful step backs so that this game could run on console and still be able to have like something like the Series S be able to run it. And that could very well be the case. So it's things like that. So graphically, I don't think that it's really moving the needle forward in terms of like graphical fidelity, or I haven't had any big and that's another thing that like is kind of crazy to me. I'm 30 hours into this game and I still haven't had one of those big Bethesda moments.
Mm.
Like the opening of the game is very bland. It's very neutered. It doesn't feel like one of those traditional big moment set pieces that opens a Bethesda game. That was the first one. I still haven't had one since, including progressing through some of the main story missions, which is my second complaint. Or this is a lot of complaints. Which
Whatever
is
number you're on.
well, yeah, which is the story itself is not that intriguing to me. Like the
Sure.
main story arc isn't. And I know we're gonna get into this, so I'll kind of wrap up my spiel and we'll get into like the main story beat. That's like actually the worst thing that I think about this game. I'm like biggest complaint. Um, the thing is, like, the side quests are way more fun, and I think the side quests are actually probably some of the best side quests that there've been in Bethesda games. Like the Freestar Galactic Ranger side quest, I thought was really fucking good. The
Yeah,
UC
justified
Van,
the video game
yeah,
essentially.
the
Yeah.
UC Vanguard story arc that's going in multiple directions, really fun. Be like having to infiltrate space pirates, really fun. Main story, I have no interest in actually completing.
Yeah.
But these other ones are really cool, and that's why I come back to the point of a game can be bad. And I'm gonna throw this one other in there. The game crashes every hour to 2 hours for me. Doesn't matter what I do, just
Yeah.
always crashes, and that sucks. And the glitches and bugs I've gotten have been like game breaking bugs where I've had to like reload several checkpoints back because I can't like I've saved too far into a bug that I now can't reverse.
Damn. I see. I haven't had that happen to me yet.
So
I've just had the
that's happened.
crashes.
Yeah, it's happened on a couple quests. One of them was a main story quest
Oh
that
yeah,
like
you were
the
texting me about it. Yeah.
sensor wouldn't work. And because it wouldn't work, it wouldn't take me. It was bad. Either way, going back to the main thing is that the game is not a good video game in terms of like the way it functions. And I think that there's a lot of issues with it, but I'm having fun and I'm enjoying my time with those issues set aside. So, with that being said, a lot of the 7, 7.5 out of 10, a lot of that is just because I really like Bethesda games. And I
For
like
sure.
being back in a Bethesda world where I get to do fun side quests, fuck off, do whatever I want, and have that freedom of exploration. There's nothing else like this type of game anywhere else. Bethesda is the master of their craft. The problem with that is Bethesda is a master of their craft and they don't have to get better because no one else is trying to emulate what they're doing. And because of that, I feel like we are essentially getting this generation's version of another Bethesda game we've already gotten 4 times before this. It's just a little bit more polished. There's some new features. You can build a ship if you can figure out how to actually build a ship, which I don't think is humanly possible, and an outpost, which I also don't think is humanly possible to actually build anything unless you are like a IQ 180 IQ and know how to inverted controls because you can't change the controls there. So that being
Yeah.
said, I think this is not a great game. I think this game borderlines on mediocre to good. I think the person who goes out and gets an Xbox for this game is going to be the person who really loves Bethesda games. Like you are a diehard Skyrim, diehard Fallout person, then yes, go get a Series S. They're not that expensive. Well, I say not that expensive. They are not, you're not
Comparatively.
comparatively speaking, go get an Xbox. If you don't, and you just are like, maybe I'll like this game, don't waste your fucking money on it. Just don't. It's not worth
Sure.
it for you if you're just doing it to try. I would say like Game Pass has really good offerings. And so there might be some more worth there. But if your only intent is to get an Xbox to play Starfield, I don't think that this is the game that you are thinking that you want to play. It wasn't. It's just a very interesting setup and situation. But Patrick, I want you to take off from here because I just talked for a long time. I want to talk about
I
the big story
Yeah, so a
moment.
couple things. A couple things, and then I wanna jump into that. I've never been this conflicted about a video game in recent memory, where, like, since last week, I'm up to about 50 hours. So I about doubled my time from last
Mhm.
week, and I'll have so much fun doing it, and I'll be pulled in so many different directions, and I wanna do so many things, and then just so many things will go wrong in the game that just completely sucks the fun out of it that I'm just like, I'm so torn on what I think about this video game, which is interesting, and I feel the urge to keep playing. I will say, in terms of the main story thing that you mentioned, where you're just like not interested in it, I've recently gotten to a point in the main story where I am now very interested in the main story. It
Okay.
took me a while though, so I will say, keep on with the main story, and maybe it'll grab you like it's grabbed me. Um, but it's also I find it really strange that a studio like Bethesda, who has built so many of their games on exploration and stumbling into these kind of new situations, built a game so devoid of life.
Oh yeah.
And what I mean by that is you go on any given planet, and because it's procedurally generated, like it'll pop up random different like places that you can go to, and like buildings and things like that, but it's all very far apart from each other, and it doesn't feel like it's been kind of handcrafted like so much of their previous games have felt, because it's not. It's only the main planets where, like your big cities are, that they built, and then any planets that are tied to the main story. But so often I feel like when I'm on these planets, I I'm like, I'm checking boxes in terms of, well, I need to find what the traits are for this. I need to find all the resources. I want to scan as many plants and animals as I can to get XP. But I'm not. It's missing that magic that previous Bethesda games have had. I'm just walking around and you see like a huge settlement off in the distance, and you go there, and like in Fallout, and then you go down the whole Nuketown quest. It was like,
Yeah.
because there are only so many cities in this game, and they're all on very specific planets. But a lot of this game is spent going to random planets out in space that have nothing on them, and it's just like this weird like.
So I think I've cracked the nut on why it feels the way it feels. It's because it's an open world game in theory only. Now, you can hit a planet and you can walk through a planet, and for the most part, there are invisible walls. It's not as egregious as I think some people initially had said, but the problem is though it is an open world game, the open world sections are almost like tied off, kind of like how Final Fantasy 16 is, where
Yeah, I
it's
see what you
open
mean.
world, but you have to go to different chunks of the map to actually be able to explore. And because the other previous games were, you could walk from one end to the map to the other in one straight line
Right.
if you could jump over a mountain, which if you played Skyrim enough, you know how to jump over mountains. You can't do that here. So you have to get in a spaceship and then you have to leave and you have to go to another planet. So any of those interactions that would have taken place before where you would have stumbled across something new, you're not driven to do that because if you were to go to be like, I'm going to fly from one galaxy to the next, one, that's impossible. And two, if you want to fly from the Earth to Pluto, it takes 9 real time hours to do that if you wanted to fly that.
And
And
that's
there's
just not
no guarantee.
fun.
And there's no guarantee you're going to see anything in those 9 hours. So I think that's the problem is this is an open world game segmented off in different chunks where it's not going to be, it doesn't feel as organic to stumble into huge things like you would in previous Bethesda games.
Yeah.
That magic, that's gone here. And I feel that in my bones.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
agree.
been one of those things where it's like, and you don't know where certain events like there's like I know like I ran into a random encounter and it was like, "Oh, here's a random quest." But I looked online and it was like, "Yeah, you can find this. It's RNG on when it pops up and it could be at any single galaxy in the entire universe that you're in." You don't know, you can't plan it. So it's like
Yeah.
that's going to be I feel like that's going to be really annoying when you have like when you're late in the game and you've cleared a bunch of quest lines and now you're just waiting on RNG to pop something for you to do. That
Yeah.
seems like a bad game design there.
Yeah, I also, and then yeah, so this next bit, and then we're gonna wrap up our Starfield talk to go into the next section of the show. A little spoilery, and not huge like. Well, I mean, I guess it is kind of a big story beat. If you don't want to know anything about Starfield, you want to find everything in terms of like story related stuff.
So
Skip
it's
ahead like a minute.
this is probably I think the third story mission. So if you mainline the story, this is probably 5 hours in. If you're me, you did this at hour like 28.
Yeah.
So
And so yeah, so skip ahead a couple minutes. I always put the time codes in the description if you want to just skip to the next section of the show. So last call, gonna spoil like a feature essentially of the game. If you don't want to hear that in 3, 2, 1. So there's this moment where you find out that you get powers, essentially magic. And I was so excited when this happened. Lucas, who was on our show last week, very sweet man. We were talking and he was like, "Hey, before we do the review or our first impressions, you should make sure you get to the end of this mission and you'll understand why." So I did that and I got to the end of that mission. I was like, "Oh, I'm really glad you told me that because I think I would have done what you were doing, Kamen, because the story wasn't grabbing me. 30, 40 hours in, I'm going to still have not done that mission because I'm
yeah,
being pulled into other places." But then you find out you this thing that you found, it gives you powers, and now there's going to be a whole bunch of other quests to go find new powers in the universe. And I was texting you, Cayman, about this. It's like at first I was so excited. I was like, oh wow, this is something. It wasn't spoiled for me. I wasn't expecting this. What a cool kind of Skyrim-y feeling thing. I've now played the game another 35 hours since I got the powers, maybe 40 hours since I got the powers. I've maybe used the powers like 4 times, and I've unlocked like 16 powers at this point. Like I have so many powers and I'm just not using them. And I feel like, I will say, where I just got in the story, I do kind of feel the need to use some of them. So like maybe I'm a touch too soon on this kind of judgment that I have, but it just feels really strange that I'm this far into the game and I've only unlocked 2 powers that even feel worth using.
Mm.
Do you just have the one so far, or how many powers do you have?
Yeah, so I only have the one so far, and I used it once, and that was because I had to show it off. I
Remind me,
forgot,
what's the
honestly.
very first one you get?
It's when you can do low gravity on enemies, I think. I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't used it
right.
in a fight because fights are few and far between, apparently.
Sure.
So yeah, but the power, I'm like, I honestly forgot entirely about powers until we sat down to record to talk about this.
Yeah,
That's
it's
and
so
it's
bizarre.
Yeah, and I will say, like in Skyrim, they did a similar thing in Skyrim where you got, I mean, you're the Dragonborn, you use absorb souls of dragons. It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I use those powers quite a bit because you had like certain unique ones that were really interesting. And I used them quite a bit, like playing through Skyrim. That was like, I loved using those. Here, I forgot, and two, I'm not far enough into the main quest line to speak too much on this to be able to be like, yes, it makes sense. But the game tries to be so grounded in reality of like this is the future
Mhm.
of Earth, or this is the not Earth. You can't even go to Earth. Well, you probably will at some point, but for the most part, it's like, hey, this is the future. This is a very grounded look at what the future of humanity is. And then they throw these alien powers at you, and it's like, yeah, man,
It's a little
kind of was just
dissonant.
enjoying having space can't like laser weapons and using shotguns in space and flying ships is cool
Yeah.
enough. Like I don't know like if I feel like the powers right now, at least for me in the story, really mean much. That's why I don't care about the main story where I told Sid earlier, I was like, there's a good chance I burn out on this game before I even get halfway through the story.
It's possible.
Because it like I want to go do, but then I'm part of me is like, no, I need to do the main quest line because I'm going to burn through all the good stuff and then I'm going to go back to this shit. And if it doesn't get any better,
Yeah.
I'm going to be more disappointed in this game. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the whole, and let's wrap up after this. But then there's the whole, like, Pete Hines before the game came out. He's high up at Bethesda. Is like the game really starts at like New Game Plus, which, like, we can debate on whether or not like that's bullshit. But then I hear people that I trust their opinions and I often align with their opinions. Be like, weirdly, he's actually right. Like I'm having the most fun on New Game Plus, and now things are clicking, and I'm like, but there's going to be so many of us that never even make it to New Game Plus.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we'll keep reporting back. I hope next week I'm singing a bit of a. I'm a little more down on it this week than I was last week. Still very positive. No, still positive, but there's just things that are weird. But then going back to what you say, I'm having fun still,
Yeah.
and I've doubled my time. So like it's just this weird. I don't know. It's strange. Also, haven't said hi. We got Cognitive Clips in the chat. Hey, Cognitive Clips. We also got Sweet Ski just submitted my list. Thank you. Terry in the chat. Been playing Saints Row, and I 100% agree with Kamen. Fun, yes. Good game, no. Correct. And then to kind of end this topic and move on to the next part of the show, Kreslin 1090 in the chat, which I don't know that we've had you in the chat before. Thanks for being here. Kreslin 1090, have y'all played Baldur's Gate 3? If so, how does it compare to Starfield? Sorry if you've already talked about this. We have not talked about this because neither of us have played Baldur's Gate 3 yet, even though we're both itching to. But yes. I will say, last week we had Lucas on the show, helped us with our initial impressions. He has since moved on to Baldur's Gate 3, and he was texting us about it. And he's, this is all hearsay essentially, but he had a lot of really good positive things to say about Baldur's Gate 3, specifically in comparison to Starfield, and saying that it's doing a lot of what he wished Starfield would have done. And he's a little concerned going back to Starfield now that he started Baldur's Gate 3 because of how good Baldur's Gate 3 is. So because of what Lucas said, I am not touching Baldur's Gate 3 until I finish Starfield because I want to maximize my enjoyment of them both. But we will
100%.
definitely by the end of the year have our Baldur's Gate 3 impressions because I'm very excited to play that game. We just haven't gotten to it yet. Kamen, what do you say
Yes.
we jump into some news with a story that you sent me, a little bit before we went live? Bit of a fucking weird one. This is getting kind of into the weeds of the video game industry, but I think it's a very interesting thing that's happening and something that I think we will see ripples of in ways that we don't quite know yet. And that's Unity is going to start charging developers for downloads. If you don't know what Unity is a game development software that tons of games are built on. As an example, before we kind of get into the weeds of this story, games like Among Us, Fall Guys, Untitled Goose Game, Cuphead, Hollow Knight, all these games were built within Unity. So they only run because of Unity. So kind of have that as some context for this story. I'm pulling this story from Brendan Sinclair at gamesindustry.biz. Unity is adding a new charge for every time a game using the Unity engine is installed, the company announced today. Starting on January 1st of next year, a Unity runtime fee will be charged to any game that has passed a revenue threshold in the past year and a lifetime install count. The amount of the fee and the thresholds in question vary depending on the type of Unity subscription the developer has. For the sake of clarity, I'm going to skip like what the different fees are for different pricing models of Unity and things like that, and go on to say that essentially, if you have sold a lot of games in the past and you have a lot of kind of revenue that you've made, you're going to be charged less money. But if you've kind of not really made a name for yourself, and they're going to be charging you a little bit more, which I think is kind of backwards, if I'm understanding it correctly. And so essentially they say, quote, "We chose this because each time a game is downloaded, the Unity runtime is also installed. Also, we believe that an initial install-based fee allows creators to keep the ongoing financial gains from player engagement, unlike a revenue share." End quote. Unity said that its runtime code has billions of monthly downloads. And additionally, they said that it's retiring. It's a subscription tier. That's not relevant to what we're talking about. But essentially, Unity is now going to be charging developers every time their game is downloaded, not necessarily every time it's purchased. Why does this matter? You might ask. Game Pass, PlayStation Plus, anytime bundles are sold where games are being sold at a deep, deep discount, especially for like charity drives, things like that, where Humble Bundle, these kinds of things where people can sometimes choose what they want to pay to get these games, that now, if even though the developer might not be making money from a game being downloaded, they're now going to have to start paying Unity. So the reason that Kamen found this, a developer was like, "Hey, we don't know when the game's coming out now because we need to figure this shit out."
Here,
So
let's
Kamen, passing it to you.
yeah, I'll read it. So this comes from the devs behind Aggro Crab. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Aggro Crab. It's like a fighting game with crabs. It's really fun. Definitely go look them up. They're really fun people. Either way, this is what they post. It said, "Hey gamers, today Unity, the engine we use to make our games, announced that they'll soon be taking a fee from developers for every copy of the game installed over a certain threshold, regardless of how that copy was obtained." That's very important. Guess who has a somewhat highly anticipated game coming to Xbox Game Pass in 2024? That's right, it's us and a lot of the other developers. That means Another Crab's Treasure, which is the sequel to Aggro Crab. Let's see. Will be free to install for the 25 million Game Pass subscribers. If a fraction of those users download our game, Unity could take a fee that puts an enormous dent in our income and threatens the sustainability of our business. And that's before we even think about sales on other platforms or pirated installs of our game or even multiple installs by the same user because it's not differentiating. So if someone pirates it, this is me talking, not them. If someone pirates a game, the developers are still going to be charged for it. The decision puts us, this is them speaking, the decision puts us and countless other studios in a position where we might not be able to justify using Unity for our future titles. If these changes aren't rolled back, we'll be heavily considering abandoning our wealth of Unity expertise we've accumulated over the years and starting from scratch in a new engine, which is really something we'd rather not do. On behalf of the dev community, we're calling on Unity to reverse the latest in the string of short-sighted decisions that seem to prioritize shareholders over their product's actual users. They finish by saying, I fucking hate it here. Aggro crab. That's them. It's them speaking. So that being said, yeah, a couple things there. Like we mentioned, if a game is pirated, the devs are punished for it. If you uninstall, reinstall, the devs get punished for that. If you have multiple people who play out of the same console or whatever, devs are punished. Game Pass, demos, PlayStation Plus, Humble Bundle deals, Steam sales, any sale, doesn't matter. As long as the game gets downloaded, they will take a hit. And the big thing here is they address the biggest point, which is prioritizing shareholders, which I think is very interesting. This reminds me, Patrick, of a situation that popped up in a quest line of Starfield, in which you have to take on one of these big corporations and do corporation shit. There's a whole storyline with corporations. You know, it reminded me of this is that like that's like we're edging closer to this dystopian corporate run world in which corporations will do whatever the fuck they want. Doesn't fucking matter. And I think this is a sign of like, this won't be, if this is a success for Unity, you can guarantee that this is going to pop up elsewhere.
Yeah.
Unity, it's also worth pointing out that Unity is considered to be the most user-friendly game engine or game creator that you can use, because Unity apparently is just much more user-friendly, and it's what you can do with it with lower knowledge base on how to develop games. It's just better for that. Obviously, there's other things you can use like Unreal Engine, stuff like that, but apparently that's way more high caliber. That's why you see Unreal Engine being used by larger third-party studios, unlike Unity. So Unity's normal base are indie devs. They're not running at a Microsoft level of, or Sony level, or EA or 2K. They don't have the bankroll to be able to do that. A lot of these games were crowdfunded.
Yeah.
And the fact that these games were now punishing indie devs.
The crazy thing to me, I did skip it, but I do actually want to mention from the story. So essentially, because I kind of stumbled through it because I went off script, but the fees vary, with Unity personal developers having to pay the most for every install above the threshold at 20 cents, while Unity enterprise accounts have to pay the least 1 cent for every install above 2 million. And so it's like the smaller your account is, the more you have to pay because they want to maximize their profit. So it's like these companies like AgroCrab, I don't know what kind of Unity account they have, but like they're a smaller company. So they're not one of these like AAA developers using Unity, which is what the 1 cent for every install is probably meant for. What a fucking crazy decision, because I just don't see how a developer chooses to do that. Like all of their revenue models, all of their like forecasting models, this wasn't part of the deal. So now like it might be a better investment to cut everything and start over in like an Epic built thing, or going over to like Unreal, building your own fucking thing. Like I can't help but wonder if Unity rolls this back, because if a lot of developers go, fuck you, we're out, then they're making even less money. But if this is just for stockholders, I don't know that they will.
So I think the other stat, now this comes from Unity themselves during an investor call in 2022. They say, and this is a quote from them on their site: the Gaming Report 2022 draws on fresh original data from the 230,000 developers. 230,000 developers using Unity right now, who make and operate over, and this is in 2022, so that number's only increased, both have only increased, over 750,000 games using the Unity engine and the Unity gaming services portfolio of products. Meaning that this doesn't impact 10 games being made through Unity. Now, sure, of those 750,000 games, how many are actually hitting that number? But maybe not a lot. But
Yeah, we can't know that.
yeah, there's a significant number of games that you have actively played that the
For
developers that
sure.
you supported are, and they're paying Unity to use all of this stuff. So it's not like they're getting all this shit for free. They're paying Unity for assets, for certain things, and all of that stuff, right? So it's not like Unity's some charity case. It's like, no, we need to start charging because, we've got to that point. Like, no, that's not the case. They are making money. They're now going to be making more money off of this.
And there was another Rami Ishmael. He's a game developer, an indie game developer. He kind of broke this down in a tweet, saying like demos are now risky for devs, DRM free games are now risky for devs. He also says updates are now risky for devs because I guess you're triggering another download from Unity. So it's like, so what? So they're gonna start weighing the cost benefit of updating their game. I don't know. I feel like this, obviously we don't understand like the true business side of this industry because neither of us are game developers, but we understand it from an enthusiast level. And both of us are seeing so many game developers tweet about this, how this is fucking like code red, that I would be shocked if this stays as like what Unity does. I just feel like they have to reverse this. Otherwise, there's so many games are going to be massively delayed, and Unity's going to lose that money because they're going to go build their game in a different engine, right?
Or I think this is where we might have a disconnect on like our belief system because I'm way more cynical. What could end up happening is it could just be like everything else that happens. Other companies go, well, if they're going to do it, here's what we'll do, and we'll match, or we'll be real close. So the cost benefit to you isn't big enough for you to switch. And you're
Maybe
stuck, and
so
we're
like
making more money, and because it's all about our shareholders, because all the people who've invested. So here's what you could do if you are interested. It's something I saw earlier today that I thought was an interesting way to do it. Invest in these companies, become a shareholder yourself, gain power, and then use the power that you have alongside everyone else's voices to shut this shit down. Because companies are focused on what are the shareholders saying. If there's shareholder backlash for improper treatment of the people who make this worth it, we can push back with our wallets. It just means we have to buy chunks of companies out and force them to do our bidding. Unlike all the other shitty people who do that and force them to do negative things to make money, we force them to do positive. It is a route. It would take a lot of people getting on board, but
so what you're saying is a large number of the population would have to have some unity to get together and buy some shares of Unity to take them down from the inside. I like it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that we won't really, because this is supposed to go into effect January 1st. Obviously, we'll know closer to January 1st what happens, but I don't see this being rescinded. But I am curious come March, April, come investor call time,
Yeah.
quarterly call to see like how bad this situation looks for Unity.
I do worry that if this becomes one of those things where like the development community is really loud for a moment and maybe a handful of them start their game over somewhere else or but enough of them are just like, shit, it's going to cost us so much more money to do this other thing. I guess we just have to eat this cost now. Then yeah, we start seeing Unreal saying, oh, well, if you come build with us, it'll only be 10 cents a download, or Epic's, oh, if you come build with us, it'll only be 9 cents a download. It's like,
but the race to
feels
the bottom,
gross.
the race to the bottom isn't going to end at 0 cents. That's the problem.
For sure. Yeah. I hope that Unity reverses this, but yeah, you're probably right that capitalism will quote unquote win here and developers will just bear the brunt of that cost. Another interesting one for this week came in. Borderlands developer
Mm.
Gearbox reportedly up for sale. This is west of the info at IGN. Gearbox, the US game company behind the Borderlands series, is reportedly up for sale. Reuters reports Gearbox parent company Embracer is weighing up its options, one of which is a sale. Apparently, Embracer has received interest from a number of third parties. Neither Embracer nor Gearbox have issued comment. Embattled Embracer is currently undergoing a significant restructuring that has already seen the closure of Volition, which I don't think we talked about last week. The game developer
RP
behind
Saints
Saints
Row.
Row that Terry in the chat is now playing and Kamen has a lot of love for. That studio was just shut down last week, which is really sad. The long-running, yes, studio behind the Saints Row series. Earlier this year, Embracer announced it would start to close studios and cancel games as a $2 billion deal, reportedly with Saudi government-funded company Savvy Games Group, fell through at the last moment. Embracer Group has been on an acquisition spree over the past few years. They've been on this show many times talking about acquisitions, including snapping up Tomb Raider developer Crystal Dynamics and Gearbox, among many, many others. The February 2021 deal to acquire Gearbox valued the company at up to $1.4 billion. And then the Borderlands spinoff, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and New Tales from the Borderlands, both came out last year, bringing in revenue for Gearbox. And then it goes on to do other stats. And there's a movie and all these things. But we bring this today to discuss, to ask the question, who do we think would be buying? Because, we've talked so much about Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard and Sony buying Bethesda, or sorry, not Bethesda, Bungie, and Xbox buying Bethesda. And it seems to be who can acquire who these days. So the question is, do we think someone does buy Gearbox, or do we think Gearbox kind of buys themselves and goes independent again? What do you think?
So I have a couple theories on this, Patrick. So Microsoft buying Activision, I don't think they're in a place right now where they can feasibly pull off buying another company. Gearbox,
Yeah, I don't
don't
think
get me
so.
wrong, much, much smaller scale, but we're still talking that's going to be $1 billion, $2 billion deal, right? Maybe less actually, because Embracer's in dire need of cash. So they might get a deal out of it and get it less than a bill, maybe less than a bill or around a bill.
Yeah.
So it is in realm of possibility, but I put Xbox, Microsoft, I put them at the very back of the list. I don't think that that's something for them, right? Sony, I also put at the very back of the list. I don't think that this is a studio, even though they have a lot of different titles under their pedigree and scope, and they have a lot of IP. I don't think Sony needs to buy them. I think one part of me goes, maybe Sony's in. I think Xbox is completely removed. I think Sony's in the race, but I don't think it's necessary. The only reason I say that they're in the race is because Sony has had previously a lot of support with Gearbox doing Gearbox related stuff.
Yeah.
So they've been a big part. Borderlands 3 historically was a big deal on PlayStation 4 when it first dropped, and they did like a big thing. It was part of like PlayStation's, what was it, when PlayStation offered like a chunk of a library when you got a PlayStation 5.
The PlayStation Plus collection.
Yeah. So the Borderlands, all of the Borderlands games were part of that. So Sony's very much in the mix, but I don't think Sony needs them or really needs to do anything there. So I don't think Sony, I'll put them at the bottom of the list too. There's 4 situations that I see. The first, I think 2K buys Gearbox. That's my number one is Gearbox gets bought by 2K. Why? 2K historically has published all of Gearbox or all of the Borderlands titles. This makes smart move for 2K. And right now, 2K needs some fucking love because NBA 2K is getting absolutely trashed on Steam for a horrible PC port.
Yeah, the second worst reviewed game on Steam in Steam history, I think.
So they're already there. Obviously, they have Rockstar and they're kind of milking the cash cow. They've got the capital. They can do it. I think they need some extra little pump there. I think Borderlands can help give them that. But the other studio I think that might actually acquire them is EA.
Sure.
EA is in dire need of diversity in their portfolio. They've been very reliant on just sports heavy titles the last couple of years. They will drop Star Wars games every once in a while, and they've got that new game, Immortals of Avium or whatever, that like kind of came and as soon as it showed up, it was completely gone. I don't even think we even talked about it.
I completely forgot that came out already.
Dead Space. So they've got capital as well, but they need to diversify their portfolio, especially in the next few years. I think a Borderlands buy works for them. The second is Embracer just eats it and is like, no, we're not going to get any good deals on this. We're going to hold them. And then the last is obviously, I think of the four main ones, the last one for me is Gearbox figures out a way to get a deal where they can get themselves out of Embracer Group. I think because of how much they were bought for, I think Embracer probably has a higher price tag on their head if Gearbox wants to go independent. I don't know if your Gearbox can potentially actually do that. And so I don't
Yeah,
think independency is something that could happen, but it is in the running in the top four. I still think 2K is number one for me right now.
yeah, I at first I was thinking independent made sense because Remedy did it way years ago from
Bungie.
Microsoft. Bungie's done it, like, but I don't know. It was so recent that they sold to Embracer Group that tells me they sold for a reason, right? Whether it's they didn't want to be the ones managing all the big moves stuff anymore, maybe they needed the cash. So I feel like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was successful. Tales from the Borderlands wasn't. I just don't know that they would have the money to do that themselves. Or, I mean, everyone to a degree would like to be the ones in charge of their own ideas, but I would also be willing to bet that like someone fucking insane like Randy Pitchford at the top of the Gearbox ladder probably negotiates a lot of creative control with what they do anyway, because he's a fucking narcissist. He's not going to want anyone telling him what to do. I think EA makes a lot of sense. I think 2K makes a lot of sense. I think PlayStation makes a little more sense than you do, only because I could see as like a response to Xbox with all the Activision stuff, wanting to be able to say Borderlands is now exclusive to PlayStation. Jim Ryan would fucking cream his leathers to be able to say that.
Yeah. But I think so. My one hesitation with that, I don't disagree, but all of the acquisitions that Sony has made over the last couple of years have all been strategic buyout.
For sure.
I think the only one that to me wasn't like a very strategic buyout was Insomniac. It was more of like a come home kind of situation.
Right. You've kind of already been a PlayStation studio.
Yeah.
Might as well just put it
been here forever. Just now come into the fold. We'll give you some extra cash and give you some breathing room. But everything else, like Bungie's acquisition, was mainly so that they could get some expertise on like games as a service, large scope scale kind of stuff. They've bought out like VR teams, which makes sense for what Sony's doing with VR. They're buying out a lot of technology teams. They're trying to get farther into cloud gaming. They're trying to get farther into certain aspects of the tech side, which I think Sony right now realizes we don't have the capital to fight Microsoft on the same scale that Microsoft is. Our best bet is to potentially try to fight Nintendo and try to edge them out and try to take away some of that. And I think that's where they're heading. But like you said, Gearbox could be one of those where it just helps bolster the lineup a little bit more to be like, if you want these games, come play them here first. Or
because my other thinking too on it is, well, if they spent all that money on Bungie for the games as a service model, and they've said like over the next year or two, they're releasing like 8 or 9 games as a service games. And most of those, if not all of those, are going to be shooting based. What if Borderlands or Gearbox is definitely working on the next Borderlands in some capacity, or the next Tiny Tina's, whatever. Yeah. All these other ones that they're making right now are for the most part new IP. Or new IP to a certain extent. Like, I mean, Helldivers is coming back, but it's coming back in a completely new way. So, like, it kind of, in a way, feels like a new IP. Borderlands, a very successful, long-running, legacy-driven IP, maybe bringing in something like that will be a almost certain success. The next game that they release might be something to kind of hopefully kind of counteract the risk on new IP. But I hear you though. I definitely I wouldn't put them as my number one choice of who I think would do it, but I do think that it's
Well, I
definitely
do.
within a realm of possibility.
Yeah, and I do like the idea that Sony looks at this as like, hey, we can start to kind of take another piece of the market because Sony's been so forward with like narrative driven single player games, adding another mix into the fold of like, hey, do you want a game that you can another couch co-op game that's a little bit more silly? It's not a games as a service, but you can have co-op and you can have so maybe. I mean,
Yeah,
could potentially be. I would say that if I had to hedge my bets, less than 10% odds.
sure,
I wouldn't take it to Vegas.
sure. Don't take much to Vegas
Hold
these
on, wait,
days.
should we do that? Should we do like video game Vegas odds things?
I mean, we could. We certainly could. John in the chat. How you doing, John? Long time no chat. I miss you. I miss you, pal. Well, Kamen, that's the end of our show now. There was, we were going to talk about Assassin's Creed Mirage and Resident Evil games coming to iPhone 15 and what that might mean. But, that's most of the story right there in a
Oh, come
headline.
on, man. The ray tracing on an iPhone. What the fuck does that
Sure.
even mean?
Sure. But I do want to quickly kind of send us home with just a couple quick hits for the game release calendar. Mortal Kombat 1 coming out next week. They confirmed Jean-Claude Van Damme skin coming to the game.
Took 30 years.
Took 30 years, but it's happening. And then also something that I meant to mention last week and I completely forgot. Kamen, did you know that there's a new Rugrats game coming to NES?
Oh, you're fucking kidding.
I'm not kidding you. It's also coming to modern consoles too, but it's a game called Rugrats Adventures in Gameland. It's being released on the NES, PC, Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox, I believe.
Is it
And
through
essentially,
limited run
it's
games?
Limited Run Games is helping publish.
Nice.
They're publishing the physical version of it, but essentially, it's going to be like the Halo Master Chief Collection, where on modern consoles, you press a button and it'll either look like the NES version or like a modern version.
So
And then on
cool.
NES, if you buy the cart, it'll work and it'll just be the NES version of the game. But it's like an old school, like 2D platformer.
Yeah, limited run games, they do stuff like this a lot. There's been a few announcements of some remasters coming out lately that have been wild. Games that
Yeah.
I never thought would see the light of day again are getting remasters through limited run games. So shout out to them. That's fucking awesome.
For sure. But yeah, this article that I'm pulling from doesn't have a specific date, but I believe it's 2024, early 2024, I think is what I had heard originally, is when this new Rugrats game is coming. And you better fucking believe it. I got an NES right there. I'm going to try to get this cart and see if I can get it running, as long as it's not too fucking expensive. But I thought that was really cool that there's a new one, that it's a Rugrats, and two, that it's actually being released on NES. Limited run games is really cool. You should go support them if you like that shit. And that's our show. John, you got here right at the perfect time, right when the show came to an end. But as John mentions in the chat, he got the form link for the top 100. Make sure you submit your top 15 for the top 100. That's going to launch on October 3rd or whenever that episode runs that week. Episode 96 is going to be when we start the top 100. We're going to do a 5-episode run, 20 games an episode. You guys are creating the top 100 by submitting your top 15 games. So make sure, whether it's in the description of this episode, on your podcast service, or on YouTube if you're watching it there, or head to our socials in our bio, link tree, all that shit. The link's going to be there as
like
well.
I said before, if you want to support Gearbox by helping Bulletstorm become #1 game of all time,
shut the
you know how to do it here.
Kamen, where can they follow you at home if they want to?
I refuse to call it X. You can follow me on Twitter at the Dumpster Boy. Save Trash Cinema's coming back. We've got some stuff in the works right now for a series. With my condition with my back, it's made things a lot harder. But I've got some people that are going to be helping me take some of the workload off of my shoulders.
Hell yeah.
But Save Trash Cinema is coming back soon. And I will hold the details for now, but let's just put it this way. we're going to be doing a series coming up, and it's going to be real fun, and it's going to be from an 80s movie that has a lot of sequels. So it'll get my
this is
feet
news to
wet
me.
again. It'll get my feet wet again.
Yeah, you better. At Patrick Schwag for me, at Spot Games Spot Games Pod for the pod on Twitter, Spotlight Games Pod on Instagram, TikTok, fucking Threads, even though I literally never use it. And most importantly, YouTube and Twitch, Spotlight Games Pod. Make sure to follow us there. We love you. We thank you. Go play some video games. Go pre-order fucking Rugrats on the NES.
Yep.
Yep.